This is Hel, yes, spelled with one L, and she is the goddess or ruler of Helheim within Norse mythology, an underworld that is wholly separate from that of Valhalla, where the greatest warriors who have died in battle go to live out the rest of their days. As for Hel, this realm is more so a place for the everyday person who passed away and now exists within a dark and neutral plane of existence, deep within the roots of Yggdrasil. And much like these two realms of the dead, Valhalla and Hel are shown to be opposite perspectives of the afterlife. The goddess and ruler of this neutral plane of the afterlife is depicted in much the same way, with one half of her face and body a dried, blue, and rotting figure, while the other half of her is beautiful, fit, and lively. Both alive and dead, Hel is a goddess who embodies the dual nature of life and death within Norse mythology. So why do I bring this up in a video talking about Kingdom Hearts? Well, just take a look at Hollow Bastion. I promise I'll go further into this later on, but this place is half alive and half dead and decayed. Its literal depiction evokes duality, life and death, light and darkness. This world, and the mythology within it, shares with us, the player, that duality is both horrifying and enlightening. Of course, Hollow Bastion isn't the only example of this sense of dualism, as each world we've come across up to this point has had their own projection of duality, be it Traverse Town's homely and warm aesthetic while being in perpetual night, or even Olympus Coliseum being the brightest world of the bunch, but with the largest amount of heartless you'll face up till now. Every world, and especially our next world, Hollow Bastion, has its share of dualism. Even as I write this script, I can literally feel and see the duality in my writing. A sense of dread from just how immense this endeavor will be to explore, but also a giddy excitement to talk about the single best world in Kingdom Hearts. So sit back and join me as we explore the mythology behind Hollow Bastion. Before we begin, I'd like to give a massive thank you to everyone who supports the channel. Whether it's here on YouTube or over on Patreon, your support means everything to me. To learn more about how you can show your support, be sure to stay till the end. With all the mandatory worlds finished, we're now given a world that is well out of the way from the others we've explored thus far. And traveling down this lane, it starts out just like any other, but we're soon set with an ominous tone, with our path now changing to a swirling vortex of darkness as we get closer to our destination. Hollow Bastion, a world that even in this perspective shows us the decrepit landscape that we're about to explore, and the duality that this world personifies. And here we make our first steps onto a world that, even in the universe of Kingdom Hearts, seems impossible. Floating structures of stone, bubbles that seem to defy gravity, water that supports our weight, and waves being pushed out and away from where we stand. Which, speaking of, the waves that we see being pushed up and out of the base of the valley are pure symbolism for the changing tides that we now face, the separation of ideals that we now stand between. As you could probably tell by this point in our journey, water has been a major element in practically every world we've been to, from the waves crashing over Sora and Riku in the opening of the game, to our flying through the air in Neverland as if we were swimming. Water has been representative of life, death, and especially so with darkness. As I explained back during our time in Atlantica, water and its depiction throughout history has been representative of both the mystical and ancient knowledge of the past, as well as the life-bringing nature of it. As cultures from Mesopotamia's use of Tiamat as the primordial sea goddess to Egypt's own Nu, water has been portrayed as a predominantly feminine figure. However, as we stand here in awe of the supernatural power of this place, you can't help but notice the utter silence as you stand there. The music plays and the water churns, but this entrance to the world feels empty and devoid of life. In essence, the antithesis of life itself. Nevertheless, this parting of the waterway we see on either side of us is also indicative of the Hebrew story of the Exodus, as Moses stood on the western bank of the Red Sea to help free his people from Egypt's rule. In the story, Moses, after hearing the Hebrew god Yahweh speak to him through a burning bush, made his way to Egypt to gather and free the currently enslaved Israelites. He had been in exile for quite some time due to killing an Egyptian, but learned that he himself was an Israelite who had escaped enslavement as a baby. However, when Moses arrived at the Pharaoh's court to make his request, who was believed to have been Ramses II, Moses was instead turned away and mocked for such an obscene request. In response, Yahweh, as a god of war, struck Egypt with 10 plagues that devastated the land to the point that Ramses agreed to Moses' terms and let the Israelites go free. But in a fit of rage brought on by Yahweh yet again, the Pharaoh commanded his army to give chase and slaughter every last slave. Upon reaching the Red Sea, Moses stood high on a rock of the western bank, and as he spread his arms out with his staff, the sea itself parted, providing a clear path for the Israelites to cross. After a full day of crossing the sea, Moses and his people were now safe, and as he lowered his arms, the parting waters collapsed onto the Pharaoh and his army that were following suit. Though we don't see any figure holding up the parted waters here, it's safe to assume that we are meant to cross this path towards our freedom. Though our freedom from what remains to be seen. Of course, given the scale of this world, the Rising Falls aren't the only piece of mythology in our literal opening to Hollow Bastion. Even as we take our first steps here, we realize that we can walk on the water without falling through. A feature that further emphasizes the fact that this world is connected to the divine to some extent. I mean, we've seen from previous worlds that water has typically forced us to traverse it by naturally swimming through it. However, this world breaks that rule in such a way that is wholly in line with the theme of Kingdom Hearts. That water is meant to represent the darkness and the chaos of the universe. Now, we've already mentioned this earlier, but this piece adds to the fact that we, the player, are the ones who have the brightest light within ourselves. That through the darkness and the chaos that we've seen thus far, we are able to physically overcome it. And just as we looked to the Hebrew story of Exodus and Moses parting the waters, we can look to Christianity and its depiction of this exact ordeal. Written in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 through 33 of the New Testament, the story explains that Jesus had tasked his disciples to go out onto the sea after feeding the masses and continuing to help the people of Israel. However, while they were partway across the Sea of Galilee, a violent storm began to form just above them that threatened to sink the boat and drown everyone aboard. Jesus saw this and, even through the ebb and flow of the waves, walked out to them without sinking below the water, calling out to them to join him on the water. Peter was the first to leave the boat and carefully stepped out onto the water's surface. But the further he got, the more frightened he became and began to fall below the waves. Thankfully, he was caught by the hand and was brought back to the water's surface, where he and Jesus both climbed back into the boat, safe and sound, as the storm began to pass. This story is a prime example of the chaos that water can represent within the Abrahamic faiths, as the storm and the waves that violently moved and clashed were calmly dismissed and overcome through the power of faith, much to the same degree that we see water being used here in Kingdom Hearts, and especially so here in Hollow Bastion. What's really interesting is that this power over the chaos stands in stark contrast to the more ancient belief that water was a divine force of the gods, or even an embodiment of them, as even within the Genesis story of Noah and the Ark, God used the torrential power of water to cleanse the earth of evil and chaos, and to renew life on it. But returning to this motif of walking on water, this depiction isn't exclusive to Christianity, as the Etruscan god of the sun, Usil, was sometimes shown interacting with water in various ways, with some images having him above it shining brightly onto the water, or at times rising from the water at the dawn of the new day. And in this specific portrayal, as an ornament on top of a storage box, Usil is seen skating across or even walking across the water. This view is more than likely a physical representation of the sunlight that is reflected off the water, but it still shows that this god of the sun, Usil, had power and dominion over the waters that brought both renewing life at times and chaotic death at others. After gazing at the majesty of this opening into Hollow Bastion, we can now make our way up the platforms to see one of the coolest and coldest cutscenes in the game. Riku scolding Beast for making his way here without the need for a ship or even a portal like what we've seen previously. But this line has always interested me, with Beast saying that he believed that Bel would be here at the castle, and subsequently manifested himself here, as this sort of act has only been seen to be possible by those who had followed in the way of darkness, showing us that belief and love are fonts of power that even the most faithful can draw from. But in this moment of vulnerability that the Beast shows, Riku taunts him, which sadly causes him to misjudge his swing and instead take a blow from Riku's sword. And here we finally get to see the embodiment of the two ideals of creation and destruction stand opposite to one another, just as the waters rose and split to reveal our opening path to this world. However, Riku drops the biggest bomb that most never expect to see, confessing that he too is a Keyblade wielder, and consequently the supposed original wielder of the Kingdom Key, leading to our friends Donald and Goofy, who were tasked to follow the Keyblade to leave us behind and stand with Riku.
Hey, don't move! You're hurt!
Why did you come here? I came to fight for Bel. And though I am on my own, I will fight. I won't leave without her. That's why I'm here.
Me too. I'm not gonna give up now. I came here to find someone very important to me.
It's cold to see our friends who we've journeyed with for so long and experienced so much with to abandon us to fulfill their sworn duty. Cold, but ultimately understandable, as they want nothing more than to find the king and follow their duty to walk with the Keyblade wielder, who was once us, but is now our rival, Riku. And there's that word again, rivals. Riku had said it earlier to either show us that we've always been friends who have strove to one-up one another to make our bond stronger, or potentially to show that he and Sora have always been at odds with one another, that in each other's eyes, the other is their nemesis or long-standing rival, a concept that, unsurprisingly, was held in such incredible regard within antiquity that the Greeks even formulated a goddess of the same name. In their belief, the Greeks saw Nemesis as the personification of balance, believing that her role was to dispense punishment and justice wherever needed. More specifically, Nemesis personified the resentment that men had towards those who obtained good fortune through excessive or unjustifiable means. This sort of resentment is actually subtly seen between Sora and Riku, as the two boys envy one another's capabilities. With Sora, he more than likely views Riku's extraordinary strength by this point to be gained through his acceptance and use of the darkness, while for Riku, he more than likely views Sora to have gotten this far through a strength that wasn't his own, be it through the Keyblade or through the friends that he's made along the way. And with these sentiments, the two have ostensibly become one another's nemesis. In addition, the goddess Nemesis was in part an agent in the matters of love, where her vengeful actions have sentenced unfavorable lovers to their doom. In the story of Narcissus, for instance, the young man had grown so fond of his own image that he ignored all others who sought his attention. The girl Echo faded into nothingness in her pursuit of the affection of Narcissus, while another young man by the name of Amenius was also ignored and tormented by Narcissus' horrid words towards his pursuit. These actions against those who sought the love of another caught the attention of Nemesis, who, in turn, condemned Narcissus to never feel love's reciprocity, who, according to Ovid, found an unclouded fountain which showed his reflection, and realizing the reflection couldn't love him back, faded from life and was transformed into the Narcissus flower. And though we don't see either Riku or Sora turned into flowers through the actions of Nemesis, we can see that these two have cared for and loved one another since childhood, more than likely in a brotherly way through Riku's loss and rejection of the brotherly love that he and Sora once had. And now, with our friends no longer with us, our primary source of damage taken from us, and a whole world standing against us, you can't help but feel like everything is just falling apart. Thankfully, we've got the strongest ally in the game joining us, on top of the fact that we're actually still able to use magic. And though most of our spells aren't actually able to fully take out the enemies here, a well-placed gravity is sure to help Beast finish them off for us. But heading up the lift to the castle's entrance, the path leading straight towards the front door may be a good option, but proves to be futile, as the doors are locked. I imagine Riku locked it behind him to stop Sora from getting inside. The dick. As for the right-hand path, this is where we're actually meant to go, as the gate blocking the path will open for us and lead us into the base level of the castle. And I must say, this area is actually super cool, an area so devoid of life that it's completely frozen over and entirely separate from the rest of the waterways. It's this area that reminds me of the Divine Comedy, when Dante and Virgil arrive within the final circle of hell to find it completely covered in ice. A land in Dante's eyes that was so separated from the light and the warmth of the surface and of God's graces that nearly every creature there was frozen in place, including its ruler, Dis. Funny enough, the only thing we actually need to do to progress through this area is jump into this first bubble that we see, which acts in much the same way as the ones in the Rising Falls, by bringing us under the water and landing us in the dark and dank labyrinth that is the waterway. A system of paths and walkways that act not only as the roots of the castle itself, but also provide power to the entire world of Hollow Bastion. However, this labyrinth below the castle is more importantly just that, a labyrinth, a maze of branching paths that are meant to confuse and disorient any who venture through its halls. In Greek myth, one of the most famous of these was the Labyrinth of King Minos, a maze that held the incredible and monstrous Asterion deep beneath the palace. Unsurprisingly, this labyrinth is home to a plethora of myths and stories that begin with the arrival of Poseidon's Cretan bull, who was given to Minos as a show of his right to rule, which then led to the birth of Asterion by Queen Pasiphae, and with the birth of the Minotaur, Minos tasked the famous crafter Daedalus to construct the labyrinth and ensure that the boy could never be seen again. Of course, the knowledge of this maze and of Minos' bastard son was to be kept a secret, and Daedalus and his son Icarus were locked away in one of its towers, only to escape sometime later through the use of wax wings. And finally, as Crete was gathering Athenian sacrifices, the young and ambitious Theseus came to Crete, wooed the princess Ariadne, traversed through the labyrinth, and slew the Minotaur. It's these stories, and many more, that helped establish the concept of the labyrinth to so many. That said, historically, the creation of the labyrinth is believed to have been shaped by Minoan belief in the mother goddess, whose symbol was the double axe. An axe that had a design that was made up of intricate lacing of maze-like lines that, when put together, would form the design of the labyrinth. Moreover, the design of the labyrinth has historically been synonymous with mazes, which have primarily been depicted as multi-branched paths, with only one of those paths leading to the center, while a labyrinth, by design, is typically depicted as a singular path leading to the center that appears to be maze-like. Much in the same way that a square is by definition a rectangle, while a rectangle is not always a square. And to that same degree, the path of the waterway here beneath the castle of Hollow Bastion acts as a unicursal labyrinth, as following the path laid before us, even through pressing each of the buttons to open and close the different gates, will always lead us directly to the center and to the switch that opens the main entrance into the castle. And now, with the front door officially opened, we only need to follow that same path back by pressing each of the gate buttons from before in opposite order to make our way back to the icy chasm, further retracing our steps as well to ride the lift back up and enter into the castle proper. Setting foot into the entrance hall, you can see just how immaculate the architecture truly is. From the outside looking in, you'd expect it to be desolate and destroyed, but the hall is in near pristine condition. However, our senses betray us, as ironically, the beast is caught off guard by the shadow pretending to be Bel, sending the prince into a rage and fulfilling the task of separating us and leaving Sora alone to face the betrayal of his closest friends.
Without Kairi.
The darkness will destroy you.
You're wrong, Riku. The darkness may destroy my body, but it can't touch my heart. My heart will stay with my friends. It'll never die.
Really? Well, we'll just see about that.
Ah!
Sora ain't gonna go anywhere.
You'd betray your king?
Not on your life. But I'm not gonna betray Sora either, 'cause he's become one of my best buddies after all we've been through together. See you later, Donald. Could you tell the king I'm really sorry?
Hold on, Goofy! We'll tell him together! Well, you know, after one and once for all.
I guess you're stuck with us, Sora.
Thanks a lot, Donald, Goofy.
How will you fight without a weapon?
I know now I don't need the Keyblade. I've got a better weapon. My heart!
Your heart? What good will that weak little thing do for you?
Although my heart may be weak, it's not alone. It's grown with each new experience, and it's found a home with all the friends I've made. I've become part of their heart just as they've become a part of mine. And if they think of me now and then, if they don't forget me, then our hearts will be one. I don't need a weapon. My friends are my power.
And here we begin our gauntlet of fights that make this world one of the best yet. Dark Riku is a fight that is equal parts challenging and a blast to play through. Full combos won't really work on him, magic doesn't affect him, and on top of all of this, he's fast and hits like a truck. When Sora said that his friends are his power, it's this fight where he truly means it, as it is highly recommended to change both party members' mechanics to make this fight a bit more bearable. Now, you can only do this before meeting the beast for the first time, but by making Donald's defensive and healing actions more frequent, and his magic attacks non-existent, while making Goofy's attacks as frequent as possible, you'll have a much easier time with this fight. And I cannot recommend it enough, but MP Gift on Goofy is a godsend, as he'll constantly make sure you have enough MP for healing. Other than that, be sure to keep calm and carry on until Dark Riku is inevitably defeated.
So your heart won this battle.
With that victory, we now claim the final trinity of the game and are able to get Beast back into the party. And no matter who you choose to be in your party, there is something more that needs to be discussed here before we continue on. That being Riku and Sora's perspective on themselves and their heroic journey that's gotten them this far. Coined by writer Joseph Campbell in the 1940s, the hero's journey, or in other words, a monomyth, is a series of stages that characters go through in their story that ultimately leads them to their destined outcome. Be it a hero or a villain, these stages are meant to narratively guide both us as participants in that story, as well as the characters themselves, into understanding how they overcome the many challenges that they'll face, and how they evolve from those challenges. In the case of both Sora and Riku, these two fall in line with these stages in fantastic ways that some have yet to be seen in our journey, so I'll try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Starting with Sora, his journey begins in the Station of Awakening, where he receives his call to action, a notion that gives the hero the purpose to begin their adventure. Then when his home, Destiny Islands, is in danger, he receives the supernatural aid of the Keyblade. However, even with this, Sora is still torn from his comfortable and known world into a world of the unknown, Traverse Town. Here he meets his guardians, Donald and Goofy, and begins his transformation from a happy and carefree child to a hero who seeks to save his friends and those he meets along the way. Which, speaking of, Sora meets a lot of new and interesting characters who have all helped guide Sora through the many challenges and temptations that he has faced at every step. But when coming to this world, Hollow Bastion, Sora experiences a death and rebirth of sorts, where Sora loses his friends and the Keyblade, leaving him with nothing. And when he confronts Riku again, he learns what truly makes him strong and is reborn and greater than what he once was. And as we'll come to see later in our journey, here in Hollow Bastion, Sora will receive the ultimate gift from a goddess, where he is able to complete his journey and begin his cycle anew. As for Riku, his journey is a bit more complicated, as we don't see every step of it, but only get snippets of his growth as an antagonist. More than likely, his call to adventure actually began way earlier with this cutscene of Riku and Sora as children, where he sees the keyhole for the door to the heart of Destiny Islands for the first time, leading him to receive that supernatural aid from either the Keyblade itself or through the shell of darkness that visited Sora at the beginning of his journey. But with Destiny Islands destroyed, Riku lands in Hollow Bastion, a world utterly unknown to him, where he meets his mentor, Maleficent, and begins his transformation. A transformation, I'll add, that to us is viewed as his downfall towards darkness and villainy. However, to Riku, this transformation is seen as him fighting for what's right and what's good, utilizing whatever means necessary to accomplish his goal in saving Kairi. Eventually, and especially through this loss against Sora, as we just saw, Riku will lose the greater part of himself to the darkness, dying in a manner of speaking, and fully transforming himself from an ambitious and strong-willed boy to a puppet of the darkest form imaginable. And as we'll see later in our journey, Riku will atone for his misdeeds and return to the call of adventure that will take both him and Sora to the same place. I bring this up as this narrative structure is incredibly important to how stories are typically categorized and presented to players, readers, and viewers. Within the Iliad and Odyssey, for instance, Odysseus, from his call to fight under Agamemnon against Troy to his journey through the underworld and escape from it, reflects this same type of cycle of the hero's journey. That it is through this cycle that so many other games, movies, and books follow to help tell their story. That said, this organization of the monomyth alongside other folk stories and myths has often faced backlash due to the complexities that many of the stories have, and simplifying them in this way can potentially dilute the context of many ancient stories, with many folklorists like Alan Duns and even Tolkien having been cited as stating that the overgeneralization of folk stories and the simplification of them can actually do serious harm in the understanding and the meanings behind the stories, and that following the cycle can actually create a bias against those stories and other stories that don't fully follow this narrative path. Now, I mention these criticisms as they are entirely valid in learning about and even understanding this topic, and I bring it up here as the story of Sora and Riku is incredibly deep and ebbs and flows like the water that's heavily seen throughout our journey. And like the water that cycles through our own world, I firmly believe that this cycle of Sora and Riku's heroic journey climaxes here and can be placed among the stories of the monomyth. Of course, discussing Riku and Sora's own heroic journey isn't the only thing that can be explored here in the entrance hall, as when looking around, you find that this room has perfect symmetry. The floor, the chandelier, the fountain, and even the pillars depict perfect symmetry, which is odd because this entire world runs counter to that concept of symmetry, that two sides are completely equal to one another. Instead, this simple symmetry within the entrance hall is what I believe to be another portrayal of this world's duality, or notion of the two ideas that share the same space but contrast one another. This entrance hall, for instance, though perfectly symmetrical, is host to one of the most dualistic boss battles in this world, as Sora and Riku fight one another as complete opposites, with friends and alone, light and darkness, acceptance and denial. Expanding this idea further and solidifying this idea of dualism is the appearance of Hollow Bastion itself, a world that is quite literally split in two, between the castle and the labyrinthine dungeon, to the castle itself being split in two. Hollow Bastion is dualism personified, with one side of the castle still clinging to life, its stonework still present and colorful, while the other side is stripped of nearly all its stonework, made bare for all to see, like flesh peeled back from the body to reveal its musculature and bones, which in a way reminds me of the pictures you'd see in anatomy class of a person split down the middle to show how the muscles and blood vessels lie beneath the skin. It's this type of image that reflects the dualistic nature of not only Hollow Bastion, but the mythology that may have inspired it. One of the most obvious depictions of this motif, as I mentioned earlier, is the goddess Hel, with one half of her body being young and bountiful, while the other half stood dying and decrepit. Two halves that physically embody the dualistic perspectives on life and death within Norse myth. Even within the Eddas, the stories surrounding Hel expressed her dualism through the power that she possessed over both life and death. That even though her appearance showed both, she was as well feared and respected by the other gods. In her origin story of her being taken by Odin alongside her brothers Fenrir and Jormungandr, she is feared for the incredible power that she possessed, and is thrown into the depths of Niflheim. But when she rules over the land of the dead and claims the halls of Hel, she is respected by the gods for her unwavering and neutral attitude towards those who enter her realm. In the story of Hermod, for instance, he enters her halls to ask for his brother Balder, the god of light, to be resurrected, to which Hel refuses, but shows compassion for them and agrees to resurrect Balder if all things animate and inanimate truly weep for him, sharing again her dualistic nature that even in death and in the cold, she provides some warmth and allows life to renew. Of course, Hel isn't the only physically and spiritually dual deity. The Roman god Janus, sometimes pronounced Janus, was the god of beginnings and endings, shown as having two distinct faces that pointed in opposite directions. Many viewed Janus as a deity who presided over transitions and war, with the gates of his temple being opened during times of war and subsequently closed during times of peace, further exemplifying the duality of the god of both war and of peace. And connecting them to this world of Hollow Bastion is the fact that it has an incredible amount of doorways or gateways, entry points that all provide transitions from a moment of peace to a period of warring effort. And a fact that I still love to this day that even connects the dualism of both these gods to this world is the name of the world itself, Hollow Bastion, as the term hollow refers to the emptiness of a space that was once filled, while the term bastion refers to a place that is heavily fortified and defends a person, people, or a set of ideas, giving this world, Hollow Bastion, a literal meaning of an empty and fortified place that once upheld and protected people and their ideals. A temple of sorts that helped many learn about the light and the darkness, as well as the thoughts behind life and death. With Riku now defeated and scared off, we're now reunited with our friends and our beloved Keyblade. What's more is that we now have free reign to explore the entrance hall and all of its hidden secrets, all of whom are unfortunately situated above us on the second floor, however. Thankfully, heading up the left-hand path and going through the door, we end up in the library, which, for me at least, would be an incredible place to spend my everyday in. But even cooler is the fact that while exploring this library, we find the exact location that we saw in Kairi's dream of her grandmother back when we were in Traverse Town. revealing to us that this castle was once her home, which honestly provides more questions than answers once again. That said, you may notice that there are quite a few books here that have some really odd names. And when placing these books back into their proper places, it opens up different pathways, allowing every nook and cranny of the library to become explorable. Thankfully, this small puzzle is fairly simple, as all you need to do is collect each book that you find and place them with their color-coded brethren. And with every book put back into place, both the lift station and the second floor door back to the entrance hall become unlocked for us. But before we go any further, let's take a second look at those names on each of these books that we picked up. Kama, Mava, Theon, Azal, Seleg, Nahara, and Hefet. 7 seemingly innocuous names that all have to have some meaning and connection to the rest of the series and to mythology. Right? Well, yes and no, or well, vice versa. From what I can tell, none of these names have ever been seen again within the Kingdom Hearts series, and it's left many to speculate who they might have actually been. Potentially scholars under Ansem's tutelage, or colleagues of his, perhaps. Or maybe even the ancient Keyblade wielders of the past. Whatever the case may be, we ultimately will never know, but I was able to discern some connections between these names and others within different beliefs and myths. Starting with Kama, this may have some connection to the Hindu god of love and personification of erotic love of the same name, Kama, though not spelled with an H. And though this perspective of the erotic love was more so a contemporary one, some mentions of the term Kama and of the god within the Rig Veda contextualize the concept of desire and longing as referring to any sort of sensory experience, with some within the Vedic belief seeing Kama within every person, as all people have desires in some way. A concept that may have been of interest to the ruler of Hollow Bastion to help learn about the power of the hearts and their ability to long and desire. Of course, this isn't the only connection that I could find in terms of the name of the author of these books, as the word Kama can be found to a certain degree within the Hebrew language, with the word, and forgive my pronunciation, Chama, a term that within Hebrew meant heat or rage, which again might be fitting to learn about here in Kingdom Hearts, as the heat of anger has been known to spur on those who consume the hearts of those careless few. But in reference to the contextual usage of Kama within the Hebrew language and belief, it's thought to have been aligned in some way with the sun, as the belief in the sun as a living entity was shared by many neighboring cultures. Kama may have actually come from such a region, or perhaps even from their own perspective. As for Mava, I unfortunately couldn't find anything on this one, but if you think it might connect to something, please do mention it in the comments. I'd love to hear your input. For Theon, this name subsequently comes from the Greek term for god, Theo, and is as well the base term for theology, or the study of religious belief. Moreover, Theon in Greek myth may also refer to the mother of the gods, Rhea, who bore the 6 original Olympians with her husband, Cronus. Sometimes referred to as Meter Theon, the mother goddess was viewed by some to be an amalgam of differing aspects within the classical Greek pantheon, as well as the pre-classical beliefs of the region, with some combining gods like Aphrodite and Demeter to create the mother goddess of all things, while others, prior to the formation of the Greek Olympians, viewed her as the combination of the Titan Rhea and the Indo-European Phrygian Cybele. No matter the case, Meter Theon was a significant figure in the formation of ancient Greek belief, and is probably our best mythological connection to Hollow Bastion, for as we explored back in Traverse Town, The Ansem reports indicate that the creation of the emblemed Heartless began here, deep within the castle's walls. Azal is an interesting one, as the only connection I could find for this was a singular mention of the word within the Hebrew apocalyptic book of Zechariah, chapter 14, verse 5, where it states, "And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azal. Yea, ye shall flee, like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee." Now, the text itself is not what we're looking at, but its mention of Azal more than likely references it as a place within Israel and is presumably located among the Mount of Olives, as stated in a previous verse. Sadly, its official location and significance are still uncertain even today. But its placement here in Hollow Bastion may connect to the fact that Hollow Bastion being where the Heartless were first discovered and where the emblemed Heartless were first created, caused a cataclysmic event that rivals the apocalyptic nature of the Book of Zechariah. For Seleg, this series of books might refer to the ruined castle of Selego within the Hohenstein forest of northern Italy, which now stands as a shadow of its former self. Believed to have been constructed sometime during the 12th century, the castle was thought to have been the feudal home of the Wolkenstein nobility within the area, as many of its residents over the centuries since its construction were inhabited by that noble family. Though little is known of the castle itself, some have speculated that the castle once housed a grand cathedral as well as a secret tunnel that led to the neighboring castle, Hohenstein, much like the tunnels that we see with Hollow Bastion and later on with its grand cathedral. As for Nahara, this one was a bit odd, as not only is it a name that seems to originate from ancient Aramaic, but it may also have been a name for the Hindu and Buddhist goddess Kumari, who was a personification of youthful feminine energy. Unfortunately, much like Mava, this is about all that I could find in my research. So again, if you find something, please do let me know in the comments. And lastly, there's Hafet, a name that could connect to two similar yet distinct names, Japheth and Heket. Starting with Japheth, this was the name of one of Noah's 3 sons within the book of Genesis within the Hebrew Bible, a figure that lived through the flood that eradicated most life on Earth and was featured prominently in aiding his father Noah during his drunken stupor, with some even believing that the name Japheth and his lineage would carry on into the northeastern portion of the Mediterranean to form the Hellenic peoples of Greece. As for Heket, our other potential connection to this book, she was the Egyptian goddess of fertility, who was primarily depicted as a frog in many reliefs. Seeing as she was a goddess of fertility, she had a deep connection to the flooding waters that seasonally renewed the Nile Delta, and was thought to have been the goddess who breathed life back into Osiris after his death at the hands of his brother Set. That said, each case, be it Japheth or Heket, connects to this world, Hollow Bastion, as we'll soon come to find that renewal and legacy are deeply rooted themes here. But with each of these books collected, placed into their proper shelves, and our game saved, we can now move on to the second floor of the entrance hall to find the walkways and even the chandelier at the center of the room, hiding a few secrets to help us in our quest. To start us off, you'll find a few grotesques against the wall that, like the lighting of the candles back in Wonderland, need a light to help snuff out the puzzle piece atop the chandelier. Heading clockwise, you'll more than likely find the Thunderstone that requires a singular thunder to provide power to the small platforms on either side of the chandelier. Now, this isn't really necessary to progress, but it can provide some help in case you accidentally fall off the ledge and don't want to walk all the way through the library again to get back up here. Next, this orcish statue requires our strength to move it, much like the stone block in Olympus Coliseum, which provides us a treasure chest back on the first floor, which upon opening gives us another puzzle piece to use. And thankfully, if we activated the platforms, we can just pop back onto there to reach the walkways once again. But continuing the path, we'll find a horned bull statue that requires us to use the red trinity to knock it down to the first floor to reveal yet another puzzle piece. And lastly, if we break these pots flanking this orcish statue, we'll unblock the flow of water at the fountain down on the first floor. In all honesty, I actually just recommend doing all of these tasks on the second floor before jumping down, just so you don't have to go back and forth each time. But with each and every emblem puzzle piece collected, if we make our way up the stairs from in front of the fountain, we'll find the doorway depicting the Heartless emblem that's been hollowed out, leaving 4 spaces with the exact shapes of pieces we've been collecting. And upon placing each piece into their respective slot, the emblem will shine, lift, and open the way for a continued exploration of this dark world. And though we've only just set foot into this incredible world that is Hollow Bastion, this feels as good a place as any to stop to take a breath. I'm not one for cliffhangers, but this world is so incredibly dense that it needs multiple videos to cover. There's still so much here that I'm excited to explore and talk about. And if you're just as excited as I am, then consider supporting the channel by subscribing, liking the video, commenting, or even joining our growing community of gamers and historians over on Patreon. We've got some amazing people like Sarah Smith, DMT Infinity, Erickson James, Vegar Arnson, Ryan, and Steve, all of whom go well above and beyond the Call of Duty. But with that, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.